As the adage goes, Black history is American history. And when considering the enormous contributions Black residents have made to the foundation and development of the city, it's clear that Black history is Frederick history. I'm Guy Sampson, and as an 8th generation Frederick native, that Black Frederick history is my history. From the contributions of my great-great-aunt Esther Greenwich, an educator who founded the first kindergarten for Black children, to her husband William, Frederick's first Black professional artist and photographer, who painted Francis Scott Key's portrait. My family story is etched through the fixtures of this city. It is not just my family. It's the many contributions of all Black residents who have lived here. It's Lord Nichols, Frederick's giant of the Civil Rights Movement. It's Dr. Ulysses Grant Bourne Sr., the city's first Black doctor. It's a story of William O. Lee, the longtime educator, community activist, and former alderman for the city. It's Judy Holland Hall, the first Black reporter for the Frederick News Post. And it's Joy Hall Only, known author and historian of Frederick's Black history. These people tell our story just as the places do. The handprints of our ancestors rippled through this city on every block. The West All Saints Street neighborhood is home to the site of the first library for Black men. The West All Saints Street's Pythian Castle was home to many of the community's fraternal organizations. Speaking of Lee, the William O. Lee Unity Bridge pictured behind me was created in his honor for his commitment to joining races and cultures in Frederick during integration. It's these people and places of yesteryear that have shaped how far this city has come, but it's our people of today who are shaping where the city is going. Many of these people are our own City of Frederick employees. Employees like Officer Willie Buntley, who consistently goes above and beyond to connect with our youth and make Frederick a safer place for everyone. Dr. Carmen Gill Bailey, who serves as the city's first chief medical officer and plays an essential role in the strategic development of programs, building collaborative partnerships, and establishing evidence-based practices for healthcare services within the City of Frederick's community health centers. Some employees, like Jordan Dorsey and our Department of Public Works, have given themselves to the city since they were teenagers and have spent their entire careers working to make Frederick a better place for all of our residents. The City of Frederick wants to recognize the work that these employees and so many others within our organization do daily to make the City of Frederick a better place for all to work, live, and play. As part of that recognition and thanks, I'm joined by Raminta Cottrell, who joined the city in 2020 and became the first Black female to lead a department as a director of Housing and Human Services, to learn about what Black History Month means to her and how she incorporates things like diversity, equity, and inclusion in her daily job. Raminta, thank you so much for being here. Let's begin with, what does Black History Month mean to you?
I think for me, Black History Month is just a celebration of our culture. It's not just our history, the trials and tribulations of it, our successes, but it's also just celebrating us today, our culture, our music, and just our existence here in this country.
Raminta, thank you. Speaking of today, in 1970, Shirley Chisholm, the country's first Black congresswoman, spoke in support of the Equal Rights Amendment, saying, when a young woman graduates from college and starts looking for a job, she is likely to have a frustrating and even demeaning experience ahead of her. Why is it acceptable for women to be secretaries, librarians, and teachers, but totally unacceptable for them to be managers, administrators, doctors, lawyers, and members of Congress? The unspoken assumption is that women are different. That was 52 years ago. Raminta, as a Black woman who has worked their way to a director level role, how, if all, does this quote about women in the workplace resonate with your experience?
You know, it's funny, as a child, I don't think I ever believed that I couldn't be a doctor, lawyer, politician. I think I was very fortunate that I had adults in my life that just believed in me. At the same time, I saw Black excellence as a child. I had Black doctors. I remember I had track coaches who, she and her husband were both lawyers. And so I always saw success. At the same time, I wasn't sheltered. I also was able to be exposed to very marginalized populations. And so I believe my parents gave me a good balance, letting me know that it's going to be a challenge. However, I could be what I wanted to be. So I think that I was just very fortunate. And I don't want that to sound like it's easy, because at the same time, they were warning me that it was going to be difficult for many reasons, that people would give me challenges simply because of the color of my skin or because of my gender. And, my parents and my aunts and uncles laugh about it now, because as a kid, I didn't really believe it. I would say things like, racism's over, it doesn't exist. And I would say I didn't believe it until I experienced it. I didn't believe it until I moved up into leadership and I sat at the table with people who didn't look like me. And it was the first time that I found that people were surprised that I was articulate, or seemed to be surprised that I was intelligent, and saying things to me like, wow, you're just so different, or you just speak so well. The things that we hear when you grow in leadership as a person of color. And so I'm not saying that it hasn't been hard, because there's definitely challenges that you face with every day just simply because you exist. At the same time, I celebrate those challenges. I think for me, it's a reminder that people of color have been through so much, and that we are resilient, and that we have a responsibility to, when you are able to obtain a position like this, you're just responsible and you have to do a good job. One story that I always remember is Nichols. She was on Star Trek, like in the 60s. And there's so many stories about her being in such a prominent role during that time as a Black female. And there's stories about her wanting to quit for various reasons, whether it was a new opportunity or just so much stress and challenge behind being a person of color and just the pressure. And she tells the story about Dr. Martin Luther King, who told her she couldn't quit. And specifically, she couldn't quit because she was the face. And it was the first time that people of color were being seen as they should be, in positions that are prominent. And so I think about that a lot, that if you're able to be in a position of power, be in a position of influence, be in a position as a leader, you are responsible. You are responsible for setting a good example, but also just creating waves for other people who are just like you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that sounds really unique and important, and I think sharing that with everyone is great. And it leads to the next question of, what progress towards equal treatment for all has been made since that quote, and how can you improve upon that today in the workplace?
Obviously we've had progress, for different reasons. Social media is major, and just technology and putting more awareness out to the things that are happening. I think also just generally, there's more acceptance of women, people in color, just in positions when it comes to the workplace. So I think naturally we've had changes, it's been better, but we can still improve. And when I think about specifically improving opportunities for people of color in the workplace, it's simply fair hiring practices. Some people think that it's really a challenge to hire a diverse workforce. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that if you have really fair hiring practices and you're just seeking the best candidates, naturally you will have diversity. And I really just try to stick by that. We have a lot of ways to go in our community and just in the world in general as far as making more equitable opportunities for people of color. But I think it's just about acknowledging that disparities exist and putting intentional efforts into improving upon them.
Oh, that's great. And as you're already talking about hiring and looking at things across the organization, how else do you incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion each day in your job?
Well, specifically for the Department of Housing and Human Services, we are a mission-based department. We only exist because the city has acknowledged that there are disparities in our community. Therefore, we have to be really honest about our mission. We have to recruit people who really understand not just the mission, but how we got here. And so we try to be really honest about that in our interviewing processes and making sure that we are hiring like-minded people. I am happy to say that as a new department, we have 6 members of leadership. 3 are 40 and under and minorities. And I celebrate that because it wasn't intentional. I screened, hired, and promoted the people that I felt were the best for the positions. And simply because of that, we have a diverse leadership team. And I think that's awesome. I think that for my department, encouraging that, and not just in leadership, it's important to have representation in leadership, but at the same time, we serve people. And the people that we're serving, it is really important for them to see people who look like them in those positions. And so for us, it's also really important to make sure that our workforce is very diverse and that they are representing the people that we serve.
Well, speaking upon the community, what are ways that the community continue to celebrate Black History Month this month and any month moving forward?
I think it's more than just loving Black culture, loving music, loving dances, loving food, loving language. I think it's honoring and accepting our history in the community, the good and the bad. You know, it's not about reliving the negative of the past and casting blame. It's just acknowledgement that the past happened and understanding the implications of the past. And in our lives today, just acknowledging that there's impact to how people act, what they believe, what they feel based off our past, but just acknowledging people for who they are, celebrating their successes, their talents, making sure that if you're an employer, you're opening opportunities for everyone, and just simply trying to connect with people that you may not have connected with in the past, people who are not like you. I think naturally celebrating Black culture or any other culture just comes with being open-minded. And, you know, we talk a lot about American history. American history, historically, for many people of color, it doesn't seem to represent us. And I think that if we open our minds when we think about history and we think about all groups, it changes the narrative. And if we celebrate in that way and just push for more inclusion, you naturally just celebrate Black history and every other history that exists within our community.
Well, thank you. You know, as you know, you're the first Black female director to lead a department in the city, and I think that the vision that you're outlining is essentially what the city believes in and our practices, diversity, equity, inclusion, and most certainly with the vision and the values that the mayor shares with the city. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raminta, for sharing so much of your story. Thank you to our employees for the work you do every day. Each of you are critical to our city's vision to serve every person through an inclusive, diverse, and committed workforce. And to our city leaders, past and present, thank you for paving the way. We couldn't have done this without each and every one of you. On behalf of the city of Frederick, thank you.